Every challenge you face in life stems from one primary cause. You care too much about how others perceive you. This constant concern with others' opinions is the root of your unhappiness. We'll dive into the book The Courage to be Disliked, co-authored by the Japanese philosopher and psychologist Ichiro Kishimi, alongside author Fumitake Koga. According to Kishimi and Koga, all forms of anxiety are intrinsically tied to the external world. They argue there is no such thing as worry that is entirely internal. Even so-called internal worry is always shaped by our relationships and the judgments of others. The authors propose that life's challenges seem more complicated than they are because we complicate them ourselves. They argue that the path to happiness is clear, you only need the courage to be disliked. True freedom, they suggest, comes when you stop fearing rejection. The problem isn't a lack of self-confidence, it's a lack of courage. Kishimi and Koga also claim that gaining the courage to embrace happiness includes the courage to face rejection. Once you develop this courage, your relationships with others will shift, and you'll experience a newfound sense of lightness. In this episode, we'll explore the key teachings from the book, including the psychology behind unhappiness, why seeking validation from others is a futile pursuit, and how to live a genuinely fulfilling life. The authors build their philosophy on the work of psychologist Alfred Adler. Adler believed that the self is a cohesive whole, where mind, body, emotions, and both conscious and unconscious thoughts work in harmony toward a single goal. According to Adler, everything we think, feel, or do is aimed at achieving a goal, even if we're not always consciously aware of it. Adler's perspective emphasizes that our goals shape not only our happiness, but also who we are as individuals. Kishimi and Koga expand on this idea by suggesting that rather than focusing on fixed personality traits, we should consider people through the lens of their lifestyle. Your habits, emotions, and thoughts form a lifestyle that you have chosen at some point and continue to choose because you believe it is the best way to achieve your goals. For example, Kishimi and Koga would argue that there's no such thing as a truly antisocial person. Instead, they view antisocial behavior as a choice, a way of pursuing certain goals. They further suggest that our goals don't just guide our actions, they shape our emotions. First, you decide what you want, and then you create the feelings that will help you reach that goal. Imagine someone wanting a job, but their anxiety about the interview causes them to either avoid preparing for it or not attend at all. They might think that if they weren't so anxious, they'd have a better chance of getting the job. But according to Kishimi and Koga, this person's true goal isn't to get the job, it's to avoid the risk of failure. Anxiety serves this goal even though it prevents them from reaching it. Kishimi and Koga also challenge the idea that past trauma is a barrier to happiness. They argue that not everyone who experiences trauma remains stuck in it. While childhood experiences may influence our goals, they emphasize that it is always within our power to choose which goals to pursue and how to live in pursuit of them. They assert, no experience in and of itself determines our success or failure. It's not the shock of the experience that causes suffering, but the meaning we assign to it. We are not defined by our experiences but rather by how we choose to interpret and react to them. No matter what has happened in your past, Kishimi and Koga argue, it should have no bearing on how you live now. Your current life and choices are entirely within your control. If happiness is within our grasp, why would anyone choose unhappiness? The authors propose that unhappiness for some is actually a strategy, a means to achieve their goals. While occasional unhappiness is a normal part of life, those who are chronically unhappy often use it to fulfill a deeper, misguided goal, and this goal is frequently tied to their relationships with others. In other words, their unhappiness serves the purpose of seeking others' approval. The authors explain that your overall happiness depends largely on the goals you set within your relationships. Are you aiming to seek approval, or are you striving to make a positive impact in others' lives? The answer to this question shapes your emotional state and your sense of self. Kishimi and Koga explain that many unhappy individuals prioritize gaining others' approval, believing that happiness comes from being seen as good in the eyes of others. This belief often leads to a cycle of dissatisfaction, because no matter how hard you try, you can never fully control whether or not others approve of you. Some would argue that seeking validation is a natural human desire. However, Kishimi and Koga challenge this view, suggesting that we don't seek approval for happiness itself. Instead, we seek it because it satisfies a deeper need within us. Why do people crave recognition? Kishimi and Koga attribute it to the influence of reward and punishment in society, particularly the way we are raised. They point out that even when people do manage to gain approval, it comes at a high cost. In their pursuit of validation, they end up living according to someone else's expectations, sacrificing their own freedom and ultimately their happiness in the process. Kishimi and Koga explain that living a life based on others' judgments, constantly worrying about how you are perceived, enslaves you. When you live only to meet others' expectations, you sacrifice your autonomy. If your happiness depends on the approval of others, you'll constantly be subject to their standards, limiting your own freedom and growth. The real problem, however, is that seeking approval is often an impossible goal. Because approval is conditional on meeting others' expectations, you can never be certain whether you'll gain it. No matter what you do, there will always be someone who doesn't like you. When approval becomes unattainable, many people react by giving up on trying altogether. They stop seeking validation, but create new negative emotions, such as self-hatred and fear, to justify their decision to stop trying. Instead of letting go of the need for approval, they deepen their emotional attachment to it. This creates a vicious cycle of unhappiness, as they continue to feel the pain of failing to meet an impossible goal they've abandoned. The second defense mechanism that unhappy people adopt is to convince themselves that they are flawed in some way, making it impossible for others to like them. By holding on to this belief, they can justify their failure to gain approval. However, this keeps them trapped in a miserable existence, as they believe they are powerless to change what they perceive as their flaws. Additionally, Kishimi and Koga explain that the need for external approval damages relationships by fostering a sense of competition. Unhappy people often view others as rivals. If someone else succeeds, it means they've failed. This competition-based mindset creates conflict because approval is conditional on specific actions. If others do better than you in areas like humor, generosity, or career success, you're left feeling inadequate. Kishimi and Koga describe seeking approval as a zero-sum game. If others succeed, you lose. This competition not only breeds resentment but prevents the formation of healthy, supportive relationships. The second harm caused by seeking approval is that it leads unhappy people to view relationships as a sacrifice, something you do to meet others' expectations. They argue that this expectation of reciprocity is toxic. For example, someone who throws a surprise birthday party for a friend might feel resentful when that same friend doesn't return the favor. The person organizing the party is really seeking something in return, which leads to disappointment when their expectations aren't met. Now that we understand the detrimental effects of seeking validation, let's look at an alternative approach: Kishimi and Koga's advice for living a truly happy life. They suggest that happy people focus on contributing to others instead of seeking approval. Happiness, they claim, is found in the belief that you are useful to others. When you focus on helping others, you stop worrying about their judgment of you. You find joy in your contributions because you know you're making a positive impact. True happiness doesn't come from seeking recognition, but from finding meaning in the work you do for others. When you feel useful, you no longer need external approval to validate your worth. Moreover, helping others for your own happiness is a much stronger motivation than doing so out of obligation or to be seen as a good person. As the authors explain, even when people offer help out of a desire to be liked, this is still rooted in the need for validation, rather than in genuine contribution. Kishimi and Koga also highlight that everyone, by merely existing, brings value to others. You don't need to achieve anything extraordinary to be of worth. Simply being around others can bring joy and fulfillment without the need for grand gestures. Happy people believe in the inherent value of all humans, regardless of their actions or achievements. This belief allows them to accept themselves fully, imperfections and all. They don't need to prove their worth because they know they matter to those around them. Finally, happy people focus on the present moment, enjoying life as it unfolds. Kishimi and Koga argue that happiness isn't about achieving some monumental goal, it's about finding contentment in the journey itself. The key takeaway from this book is clear. Some people will never like you, no matter what you do. To achieve lasting happiness, you must embrace this reality and live according to your own values, regardless of others' opinions. Let go of the need for validation, and instead develop the courage to be disliked.